This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Justin Dyck. He is a prolific director whose latest film, Anything for Jackson, is now streaming on Shudder. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. We're so pumped to talk to you. But before we start talking about Anything for Jackson, how did you get into horror?
How did I get into horror? I think I've just been into movies forever. And, and horror is one of movies.
Cool. Hey.
I don't know. As the theme of the podcast suggests, I got scared when I was a kid and I enjoyed it. And I just kept going back for more. Just started early on loving movies. My dad was really into films, so we would go to the theater, or I was a VHS kid. We'd we'd get the 100 pack from the local video store, so I would just go in. They would know me by name and just tick off one because we already prepaid for 100 rentals.
So cool.
Come home with stacks every week, and I would just watch everything I could get my hands on. So. Horror is one of those, but I enjoyed so many genres growing up, and I continue to love. I don't really say I have a favorite genre. I just love good movies. So
yeah. Did your dad like horror too? Did he watch those with you?
He would, yes, but it was very specific. The first horror movie I saw was Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Oh, okay.
That's
my personal favorite.
Yeah, I saw it at a sleepover, which I probably wasn't supposed to be watching.
How old were you?
I don't know. Definitely under 10.
Okay.
I don't know specifically, though. So that I found crazy. I remember trying to pretend I was tough and say, well, that's funny. That's not scary. This is funny. I'm not scared. You guys are scared. But it definitely scared me. And then, my parents found out and they're like, oh, we don't really want you watching that stuff. And then, my dad took me aside and he's like, yeah, that's all gory and scary. You want to really be scared? I'll show you something to be scared at. And then he pulled out all his favorite horror movies, which was more like the psychological thriller type stuff. So, like he showed me Play Misty for me, pulled out all the Hitchcock stuff, The Bird, Psycho.
Oh my God.
And,
your dad was like, no, we're going to go hard into the horror.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was, I think it was the gore they were opposed to. They didn't like the blood and guts on the screen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you something that like terrifies you to the soul instead of just be uncomfortable with blood.
So what were a few of your favorite horror favorites growing up? I know you said you had you loved all film, but do you have a couple favorites that you loved watching when you were a kid?
Yeah. Silence of the Lambs, I know, shook me the first time I saw that. That blew my mind.
It still scares me.
It's so incredible.
It is an incredible film that will continue. I've seen it so many times at this point, but it continues to get under my skin no matter how many times I watch it.
I'll still revisit every iteration of Hannibal Lecter from the series to the other movies.
Oh, yeah.
Just to get a glimpse of what Silence of the Lambs was. There's a lot of them that are good, but none of them are Silence of the Lambs. So,
did you watch the Hannibal series on NBC?
I did, yes, and I liked it a lot.
I loved it so much.
Yeah, still can't live up quite to Silence, but it was an incredible series for sure.
So transitioning into being an adult, what draws you to horror now?
I don't know. It's the same thing as being a kid, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the anti-Hollywood. The most films want to tap into something you aspire to, where horror is just the polar opposite of that, and wants to show you the dark side of humanity, and they can deal with themes that other genres can't. They can make you think. They can deal with death and grief and so many emotions that just they can do it in a fun way, I guess. There's still that rush of being scared, but being safe in your seat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have a really incredible answer for that. Same thing draws anyone to horror. It's just a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you like the more fun kind of horror? Or like, cause like we've seen like, it seems like recently we've kind of had a trend of more of the like deep psychological, or like the, what some people call elevated, or people call like, which I hate, but like people call like just sort of the kind of slow burn creeping dread, or are you more a fan of the more fun type horror movies, or do you like them all?
Yeah, I like them all. It really is. It's got to be good. So I love. There's some fun ones that I love. I think I probably do lean towards the darker, creepier ones.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is Martyrs.
Oh my God! Yes,
let the right one in. So, Martyrs typically wouldn't be my style, because a lot of people equate that to torture porn, and I don't like torture porn, but Martyrs, just the story behind it and the journey it takes you on is so incredible.
I love New French Extremity films, and I feel like they're like similar to torture porn, but I feel like they exist outside of it because I feel like they have much better stories, and gore supplements those stories, instead of in torture porn films, it feels like the gore is the centerpiece. Totally. I also have like a poster of Martyrs like sitting in front of me right now. So. Oh, great.
My Netflix algorithm gets very confused by me. They're like, you watch this movie. Do you want to watch that one? I said, no, you don't understand me at all. I don't want to watch that one.
And so do you remember the last film that scared you or reminded you of what it was like watching horror movies as a kid?
Oh, great question. Probably Hereditary.
That is so funny. Like the last four guests have said Hereditary, and it's so interesting. But it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That movie fucked me up, so.
Yeah, they obviously they played it straight as an arrow, and the performances in that, I just think it's so. Yeah, they had some great new scares, and it was it takes a lot, working in film. It takes a lot to for me to completely lose myself anymore. I'm always thinking like, oh, that was great. How'd they do that?
Yeah.
But that one, I lost myself for quite a while. So
I love that about when you find a movie that does that, where it just sort of like, because I'm the same way. Like I went to school to be an English major. Whenever I sit down to watch something or read something, I'm always, I can't turn my brain off a lot of times. And so I'm always like thinking about the themes, or I'm always thinking about dissecting like what's going on. But when I can find a movie that like just shuts me down and I'm like immediately wrapped, then I know this is a keeper. And Hereditary did that to me too. So I completely understand.
Oh, you know what? Host That Zoom meeting movie, that was also a really scary one.
That scared. Oh my god! Sorry, I love found footage, and everyone knows this.
You
but
just made a fan of For Life for
I was
Mary
going to say
you said martyrs and found footage right there.
But Host really absolutely scared the shit out of me in a way that I wasn't expecting. And I think it's also amazing. It's just a testament to creativity during this ridiculously shitty time.
Totally.
And like being able to make such amazing narratives, even with, limited resources.
Yeah, there's something about well done found footage that is just hard to compete with in terms of scariness.
Right? Oh, thank you. Exactly. You made a fan for life with me. But so transitioning into talking about your creative life. So before we talk about anything for Jackson, we need to discuss your previous filmography of Christmas movies.
Yeah.
Tell us how that happened.
I have no idea. I blacked out.
Your entire filmography has been one big blackout.
Well, I, like every struggling director, just trying to figure out how to navigate this crazy business. I live up in Canada. I don't even live right in the city of Toronto. I'm outside of Toronto. So, no connections to the film industry. I just fell in love with cameras and stuff as a kid. So it was, just always trying to figure that out. So eventually, I make my way up. I'm working as a cinematographer. I'm directing music videos and things like that. And I work as an editor as well. So I find this fantastic company. They're just starting up, and they hire me as a cinematographer to shoot this like kids project for like 5-minute kids shows on TV. So I shoot that, I post that, and then I start working with these people, and they're fantastic. And like, hey, I've been trying to get a horror movie off the ground, partly because of my love of horror, but also it's a very logical step for a first-time feature. That's a great genre to work in, because you can do it with 5 kids in a forest.
Right.
So I wanted to make a horror movie. So I said, hey, can you finance one? So the producer very kindly said, absolutely, I'll see what I can do. So she goes off to MIPCOM or one of the shows, comes back and says, all right, great news. I got film financing, but we've got to do this movie about a monkey who plays soccer first. And I said, oh, well, that's different. But hey, I don't have a movie under my belt, so let's do it. Let's make a movie about a monkey. And advice to anyone listening: don't work with monkeys. They're awful little creatures. This one weighed maybe 15 pounds, and he destroyed everything. Yeah, they're just jerks. They like being jerks.
Oh, I'm looking at the poster right now, and it looks like a little shit.
He does. But and they always say like don't work with animals and kids. And I'm looking at this poster and it's both. I'm sure the kids were fine, but man, I can't imagine.
Oh, is that the poster with the lion on it?
No, it's just it's this monkey in the middle, 2 kids, and then the monkey in the middle sitting on top of soccer balls.
A bag of soccer balls.
Oh, okay. I got to pull that up.
Here, I'll put it in the cast chat. It shows up on the left.
Yeah, that is the real monkey. If you look real close, you see his eyes are 2 different sizes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when they released it on Netflix, they renamed it as It's a Zoo in Here, and there's a lion on the poster and like an orangutan. And
wow. Interesting.
Are they in the movie?
No.
I love that. Oh, I love that.
So yeah, I did that movie, and then it went well enough. So I got another one, and we made a movie called My Dad is Scrooge. And that one was actually I worked with Keith Cooper, the writer of Anything for Jackson. He wrote that one.
Oh, cool.
And that one I still stand by. It's a great, fun kids movie that was made for like $25.
Hey,
it's
love that.
It's about a bunch of kids who need to save a farm. Their dad is foreclosing for the bank. And a bunch of talking farm animals show up at their house and ask them to help. So it's ridiculous, and had absolutely no money, but I still think it was a fun movie.
That sounds lovely. Anything with talking animals, I feel like is upped in my book.
Yeah, for sure. We got like John Heater's a voice in that. We got Charles Shaughnessy. It was
wow.
Yeah, it was a fun movie. So, but yeah, after that, it just snowballed, and it's an extremely prolific company I partnered up with to make these, and they just kept bringing movies in, and these kids and family stuff turned into Christmas. It was kind of right as Hallmark was exploding, so you know, every network wanted their version of a Hallmark film, so we started making those, and I think my record is like 9 in 1 year.
I was going to say, I'm looking at your filmography and the amount, like 2019, a ton, 2018, 2017. It's like, it's amazing how many films you're able to make and how like extensive your filmography is. Yeah,
they're not my first choice from an artistic standpoint. But we're making entertainment. We're producing a product that these broadcasters want, and there's a huge fan base for. And so, it's, I definitely got to hone my skills on those movies.
Well, I mean, we've talked with Michael Verratti, who is a writer, and he's a horror writer, but he has written a number of Christmas movies, and even like David Dakota directs a lot of Christmas movies. So like, there seems to be like, I think because it can be a prolific job that you can have steady work so that you can actually work on maybe passion projects in between. It seems like that seems to be a trend that we've seen in a lot of horror creators.
I think it's just a trend everywhere. Someone told me a couple days ago that HBO is getting into these, feel good Christmas movies now. And
it's because Hulu did Happiest Season. And then, that's just my theory. And I feel like maybe that's like also convincing people that we should do more holiday movies.
They're just so popular, and they're relatively easy to make. It's a formula plot line that you follow.
I was going to say they're relatively formulaic.
Yes. And you just stick pretty people in front of sparkly lights and make them talk about Christmas.
Hey, love that.
What's not formulaic? How's that for a segue? Can we talk about? Can you tell our listeners a little bit about Anything for Jackson and kind of what it is about for those that maybe don't know?
Yeah, Anything for Jackson is about Audrey and Henry, a loving couple who lost their grandson in a car accident recently. And they have, through lots of sadness and research, discovered there might be a way of getting their beloved grandson Jackson back. And that is through a reverse exorcism. So they decide to kidnap a pregnant woman and keep her in their house until they can perform this reverse exorcism, putting the soul of their grandson back into her unborn child, and then when the child is born, they'll have their Jackson back. Pretty simple.
Casual.
Yeah.
It's such a wild plot, but what I love about it is how it starts off as this almost kind of darkly surreal comedy, especially with the two main actors, Sheila and Julian. I love them, and I wanted them to succeed even as they're doing these like most horrible things, because they're such likable actors.
They're likable actors. They're likable people. They knocked this one out of the park. They were such a pleasure to work with. But you're right. They're very normal people driven to extremes. So,
and I love that you cast like two older actors. I know there's a lot of discussion about like how people cast a lot of younger people for older roles, and it was just really refreshing to see two actors who were like age appropriate playing these characters and doing it so beautifully, to the point where you feel so much empathy for them, again, even though they're doing some dark magic in their home. Like, they're just so sweet, and they love each other so much.
They do. They absolutely do. I spent a lot of time casting people based on their commercial viability. So when we finally found the financing for this, it was we just had to go for it. And we said, we need the absolute best actors for this role. I don't care what what test audiences want to say. Not that we got into any of that with this movie. But it wasn't about commercial decisions at that point. We just had to tell the story and make it feel real. You mentioned it plays a little bit as a comedy. I found it funny, but really it was about realism. We just wanted this to feel like your neighbors, and they're not going to be talking about heavily dramatic things forever. They're just having breakfast and trying to keep their mind off of this thing they've been planning for years.
Well, and I think that might be kind of like the surrealness of it is that like these do feel like the next door neighbors, and yet they're Satanists, and yet they're trying to put their grandson into the body of an unborn child. And it's like my favorite moment, and the moment that like I messaged Mary Beth, was like, okay, I love this movie, was when Sheila's character is sitting there reading the printed out like lines of what she's going to tell the poor kidnapped woman, and she is just like going through it, and she's like, oh, I got to get my glasses on. She's waiting for her husband because she's getting far ahead in the script. Like that moment of it felt so like real and yet so surreal given what was going on at the time.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, that was the goal for sure.
How did you come up with this idea for Anything for Jackson?
Keith Cooper and I have been working together for a very long time, and been trying to get a horror movie off the ground for our first time. So we've had a bunch of ideas, a bunch have been taken to script, and we've been around pitching to anyone who will listen. So we pitched, and it one went well, and they said, yeah, what do you have in the more like the ghost movie space, or the more ghost movie space. And we said, oh yeah, we've got a few of those. Let us get it together, and we'll send you the one pagers when we get home. So we hop in the car and head home. We're like, all right, we got to come up with some pitches. So yeah, we went through. We said, all right, ghost movie. What are the subgenres? We looked through them, and we just wanted to put it on its head. We said, all right, exorcism. That's very popular, but it's been so many people have done exorcism films. What's a fresh take on it? Like, well, what's the complete opposite of an exorcism? And, you can debate whether, since it's not a evil spirit, it's just a ghost of a grandson, whether it's officially a reverse exorcism or not. But that's where the idea came from. Just why would someone want to put a spirit in instead of take one out? And I think originally it was supposed to be two parents, but going on that theme of we have to find the new fresh take on this, we just kept spinning it until, as many decisions as we could make would be the opposite of what you expect.
Wow.
So the effects and the creatures and everything in this movie are so good and very alarming in a good way. So what was it like? I mean, you obviously worked with special effects artists and costume artists, but what was it like, kind of that process of creating these very intense death scenes and these very intense, creatures?
Oh, it was great. We teamed up with Carly Morse, who I actually met her on some Christmas movies we did together. But I knew she was fantastic at practical effects and prosthetics and all those things. So we talked to her. She was supposed to be, I don't know where she was going, up in the Yukon territories or something for some job. But she said, no, it's okay. I'll build all the ghosts for you. And then I'll just send someone from my team to apply it, because she loved the project and wanted to be involved. So as luck would have it, her other shoot got pushed. So she was able to come out for us and make all the ghosts in person. And we had a lot of back and forth, sending her ideas and, finding things in Pinterest boards and all those things. and we just found how we're going to make them all as scary as possible. And she built them all and applied them all, and she just absolutely crushed it. She
succeeded.
She certainly did, because one of my recurring nightmares that I had in I would say through from like late high school into my early to mid 20s was losing my teeth and them just falling out. So there is an image in here that is just so haunting, because it's it reminds me of my dreams of waking up and all my teeth just start to slowly fall out. And that image in there, I'm like, this is horrific as fuck. And I think that what works so well about it is the fact that it does start in such a natural, as you said, and also sort of a darkly comedic point, that by the time it gets to the horror, it's almost like it disarms you, that you're not expecting it to do much, and then it just goes there.
Yeah, well, that you hit the nail on the head there. So this, I've got to tip my hat to Keith for writing it. He tapped into dream analysis for all of the ghosts.
Well, there you go.
The character that gets haunted by each of those ghosts is specifically chosen for the situation they're in. So Henry, being the more logical character, he's less driven by emotion and more trying to figure this out for his wife, for whom he will do anything. At that point, he is losing control. The plan is no longer in place. So that feeling of losing control, you'll typically dream of your teeth falling out. So financial troubles, I think, is another part of that dream. So maybe those were your feelings back in your 20s. And then with Becker, of course, a little more on the nose, feeling of being trapped. So you're going to feel like you're suffocating. So that's where our suffocating ghost came from.
That was the most terrifying. So good, but also just like, like it's very uncanny movement and very just.
Was that all performance or was it enhanced in any way?
No enhancement whatsoever. That is the genius, Troy James.
Bendable.
Yeah. So there's an amusement park here called Canada's Wonderland. And I went there when they have this Halloween thing every year. So I went there when I was like 19. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing Troy there just dressed up as like a zombie. And I saw him like chasing people around upside down and backwards.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
My friends, I was like, we got to stop and watch this guy. He's doing crazy things. So, yeah, fast forward to making this movie many years later. And I talked to my friend who's helping us cast this movie, Rebecca LaMarche. And I said, Rebecca, I found this guy. I was Googling, like, Halloween Haunt at Canada's Wonderland and looking for people with home video. And sure enough, found his name. And Rebecca's like, yeah, let me look into him. Turns out he had just come off a Guillermo del Toro movie.
James
Corden, like, I don't know, 2 weeks prior. I'm like, oh, shoot, we missed him. I guess I shouldn't wait 15, 20 years before reaching out to somebody. So, all right, fine. Well, but I love this idea so much. We got to find a contortionist. So we go looking for one. We find one. She's phenomenal. We offer her the part. She responds, sorry, I can't make it. I'm out of town for the shoot. But I have a friend who I perform with. His name's Troy James. He wants to reach out. I'm like, okay. So puts Troy in touch, and he's just like, yeah, cool, I'll do this. And he's just like the nicest, least scary person you'll ever meet. And we end up getting him just because he liked the project. So he came out. He even brought his own contact lenses because we couldn't afford those.
Oh my God.
And yeah, he came out and just made the movie so good.
Oh, he was the jangly man in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah,
wow.
He's in a bunch of. He's the old woman in Hellboy.
Oh shit!
He's in the new Blumhouse Amazon. What is it called? Black Box.
Oh yeah.
So
dang.
If you ever see someone walking upside down with their heads on right side up, it's probably Troy.
That's amazing.
Also, just really quick, I love that a lot of the people that you worked with for this movie come from Christmas movies. That makes me very happy. It is so cool. Like, it's so versatile and just, it's cool to see that.
Yeah, well, a little industry secret. People making Christmas movies, they're not necessarily in it for the love. They're all just filmmakers, all trying to make great things. And, I think... even all the way up to the biggest stuff, right? Like people working on Avengers still have a love of independent, more out there cinema. So, Christmas movies are a commercial product and people there like making really creative stuff too. So, I was lucky to be able to reach out to some actors we certainly couldn't typically afford for this, but like Lynette Ware, who played Detective Bellows.
I was just going to say, I saw her this year in Girl, and that was like, I think the first movie I've seen her in, and she was phenomenal in that. So I was like, I saw her pop up in this, and I was like, oh my gosh, is that? Yep, it is the actress from Girl.
Yeah. She's been in a few of my Christmas projects, but Lynette can do anything. She jumps back and forth. Like she's in a bunch of, pretty significant shows right now. I think she was in like Shaft back in the day. And so she's, she can do anything, and just a good friend, so she was very kind to come out for us. Caitlin Lieb from Slasher, she came out and played Yolanda, just come out for a couple days to help us out. It was nice to be able to reach out to my friends from the Christmas world and have them so eager to help us make this more than we could afford.
That's so cool.
And do you think you're gonna keep making horror movies?
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot easier now that I have one done.
Yeah.
So, it's, I don't know which one it's going to be yet, but we have a few ideas and a few scripts, Keith and I together, and we're the ball's starting to roll again. So we're taking meetings, and we'll find out what's next, hopefully soon.
That's awesome.
Good.
So what film are we talking about today, Justin?
Today we're talking about The Princess Bride.
Oh my gosh, yes. So if you are unfamiliar with The Princess Bride, I'm so sorry, but also here's a quick synopsis. While homesick in bed, a young boy's grandfather reads him the story of a farm boy turned pirate who encounters numerous obstacles, enemies, and allies in his quest to be reunited with his true love.
So before we get to asking you about your childhood trauma about this, I have to say, watching the opening of this in the current quarantine situation we are in was like so wild, because I'm like, where's your mask? Why aren't you wearing masks? Everyone is like touching each other. You're sick. You have COVID. Why isn't anyone like that? That was my immediate reaction to watching it this time.
It's a very touching movie.
That's so sad. But I agree. I was watching a movie last night and I was like, everyone's very close to each other and they're not wearing masks. I'm like, this is really terrible. But anyway. So, tell us about this movie and why you picked it. Paint us a picture when you first saw it. Why did it scare you so much? Like, just tell us all about it.
Give us your horror story.
Yes.
I picked it because I watched this movie on repeat for probably a decade of my life.
Me too.
Oh, same.
I wore the VHS. It was one of two VHS movies that my grandparents owned. So when we went to visit them, I would watch this and then Crocodile Dundee and then back to this.
Oh my God.
And so, it had a profound effect on me. And I've had many a nightmare over the years where that woman is yelling boo at me.
Ooh, yes.
And then, there's just so many parts in it that I think I loved the adventure and how much fun it was. And then I just sort of put up with the scary parts, but I still remember very clearly covering my eyes and trying to turn away from not even necessarily the parts they're trying to make scary, like when the guys in the dungeon, or what's it called, the pit of despair. The pit of despair.
The pit of despair. The pit of despair.
When he's patting down the wound on his shoulder, and to go back now, like they don't even have a fake wound; it's just a little bit of red. But the way he patted it down with that sponge, I was just like so disgusted and so disturbed. And the ROUSs, of course, are really scary, and so there's a lot of parts in that movie that I just remember having a lot of dreams about it, but it wouldn't stop me from watching it. I had to go back and see it again.
Do you remember the first time you saw it? Like sitting down, was it with your grandparents or was it at your house, or how?
No, I think I was too young. I was. I wonder if I would have watched it with somebody, or it may have been at my grandparents first when I watched it, which would have been just like, I was probably being annoying and they sent me into the room to watch a movie. So no, for whatever reason, I remember watching this one alone most of the time. And I would watch with my sister, and then as I got older, I would like watch with people or show people who hadn't seen it. But no, it's funny. I don't even remember a time before seeing it. That's how I
was going to say. It kind of sounds like this has been like ingrained in you from the very beginning of memories.
Definitely is.
Yeah, that's kind of the same way with me, because this movie, it came out in 1987? Yeah, 1987. So I would have been 6 when it came out. And so I probably was like, I was probably like 7. It would have been, I didn't see this obviously in the theater. It would have been when it came out on VHS or beta tape. Was beta still a thing at 87?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So like it was so it must have been like maybe 1 or 2 years later, because I can't remember how long it took for it to come out on video back then. But I don't remember life before this movie. It's such a weird experience to think about that.
Totally. Yeah, and I recently showed it to my own kids, and started going through it. I'm giving them warnings as parts are coming. Like, all right, now this part's scary, but just remember it's pretend, blah, blah, blah. They don't care at all. They're I don't know. I guess that, they liked it, thank goodness. But the parts that were scary, like, Dad, that's not scary. And my son is 5, so he's younger than I was when I first saw it. But he's just like, yeah, it's fine. So I guess all these like 3D animated epic battles between dragons have just made them a little less sensitive.
I wonder if, like, I feel like as I kept watching this movie, like, more I understood the humor, like, especially with Vizzini.
Oh my God.
Vizzini. Wallace Shawn is such an amazing actor. I feel like he's in so many things that I never remember his name. Like, he's one of those. But he is just like, the jokes he says in this film, like, Terry wrote down, "You hippopotatic landmass," and him screaming "inconceivable." He's just so funny, and I thought he was funny because of the way he spoke when I was a kid. But I think the older I get, the more I appreciate how he was written as a character.
I think that's part of the magic of this movie is that you can watch it when you're 5, love it, and then watch it a year later, and there's 2 new jokes for you, and then a year later, there's 3 more jokes for you, and they never stop. I'm sure when I'm 80, I'll watch it again. I'm like, oh, I get that.
That's kind of was my experience watching it now, because it has been a very long time since I've seen this movie. But like, I was watching it and I was picking up a lot of the dry humor, especially that Inigo would say, like the moments where they're being chased on the ocean by Wesley, and he just makes a comment of like, I wonder if he's using the same wind we're using. Like, it's just so funny because obviously he is, and that's why your guys aren't being able to escape him. But it's just that kind of like sly little that kind of humor that pops in, or the like when he's giving his whole like backstory to Wesley about like his father and getting the slashes on his face, and you know how that kind of made him want to pursue fencing and all of this stuff, and he's like, it's been 20 years now, I'm starting to lose confidence. Like, it's this tiny throwaway line, like, where it's so funny because it deflates that sort of, like, heroic story that these fantasy novels are always about, where it's like something traumatic happens as a kid and now they're spending their life trying to avenge their family or something. And then he's like, oh, I don't think it's actually gonna happen. It just deflates that heroic story. It's moments like that I think are so brilliant about this script.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's, I don't think I'll ever grow tired of it, that's for sure.
Now, when I was a kid and I saw this movie, I had a realization about 2 minutes into the movie this time where I was like, oh, I think this might be the movie that I realized I liked boys. Because when Wesley comes on the screen, I'm like, oh yeah, Carrie Elways, he was really an attractive young man.
He's still an attractive older man. He's in the latest Black Christmas movie. Like, damn.
Yeah, but that was like my realization was like, oh, because it's been kind of this thing on Twitter, like who was your first cinematic crush, and I never really knew. Like I could never really answer that question until just now. I'm watching this. I'm like, oh, yeah, it was probably Wesley.
Yeah, I can see that.
Not a bad first cinematic crush, though. He's everyone
so
in this movie's hot. Sorry, but it's true. I also quote this movie all the time. I don't know if you guys do, but my partner and I constantly say, "And the bed, the one, the peanut," constantly.
If anyone says I need it, you can't not say that.
You can't not. Like, it is so, we talked about this already, but like this movie is just like in my subconscious. Like, it's just like ingrained in my brain.
I wonder if that peanut joke was ADR, because it's on the back of the ship as they're sailing away.
Yeah. Because I never caught the rhyming part. I always like didn't understand the end of Betta got a peanut. I was like, oh, they're rhyming. They're like making fun of him.
Yeah,
and good for them for keeping Andre the Giant's voice, because he was hard to understand, especially as a kid with his thick accent. But they went with it. That's
one of the benefits of technology today, is that like I could turn on subtitles, because there were things that are said in this movie that for years I never really understood what was being said. Like, it wasn't until Mary Beth kind of quoted the Vizzini line about the hippopotamic landmass. I'm like, I don't have no idea what he is saying, and now I could pause it and I could write that line down, because it just there's so many little throwaway lines and so many thick accents in this that like it sometimes is, especially when you're a kid, hard to like figure out what is actually being said.
Well, I'm going to say something amazing that I found out recently. Is
What's that?
Like, this has just been a movie that exists. I never like looked into it as a film, and like, people made this movie.
Oh.
And then I started looking up, obviously Rob Reiner directed it. He had the most incredible stretch of movies anyone's ever had with Princess Bride right there in the middle. Let me pull it up here so I don't get the order wrong. So this is Spinal Tap, 1984. The Sure Thing. I don't think I saw that one. But after that, he did like the best version of every genre. Stand By Me, like best coming of age story. Then Princess Bride. Then When Harry Met Sally. And then Misery. And then A Few Good Men.
I didn't realize Rob Reiner directed Misery.
Isn't that crazy?
That's
insane.
Every single genre, he just knocked out of the park, one after another.
That's wild. I mean, and then his filmography continued, and he did some really.
He's done some great movies, but that 80s,
wow. Yeah, I never really thought about it. I like Mary Beth. I completely forgot that he did Misery, but man, two really fantastic adaptations of a Stephen King work right there. I do have a question. If you grew up in the 80s, I felt like the 80s were a time for fantasy movies as well. Were you a fantasy fan?
Not so much, actually. No? Okay. I watch them. I do. There's some fantasy ones that I like, but I never really got into like, the Star Wars and things. Right. And I think that's just because I was watching, as I said, these scary movies or action films with my dad. Like I watched the Lethal Weapon trilogy a lot when I was, in the 80s, as opposed to pulling up Star Wars. I'm not sure why. I watched them and enjoyed them, but it never seeped into my, I don't know, just, it never became my thing, I guess. Yeah.
Cause like because I remember so many at that time you would have like Disney was doing the Dragon Slayer, and then you would have like, the Sword and the Sorceress, and there was like so many of those type of like Conan the Barbarian, and
Willow,
the Beast. Oh, Willow! I love Willow.
I get Willow and the Princess Bride not necessarily mixed up. They came out one year after the other, but like when I think of movies that I loved as a kid that are like kind of freaky, I think of the Princess Bride and Willow.
Yeah. And then I put Never Ending Story in that category too.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
It's just there were so many of those at that time, and like it really fostered my love of both like horror, because those fantasy movies definitely like had ties in with horror, and this movie does as well. It's like moments. There are specific like set pieces. There's the shrieking eels, which I think still look good today. I'm gonna be honest, when they're like slithering in the water, it's still like I was like, oh, that's actually a really effective use of practical effects right there.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. The practical effects actually are really good in this movie too. Like the rodents of unusual size. Like I know they kind of look cheesy, but also like not bad.
Yeah.
No, I could definitely tell this time that it was a man walking on all fours in like a giant rat suit, but like it was like it looks good, and it's very convincing. The fire swamp is actually a really good set piece, I think, for both kind of humor but also like horror.
Yeah,
for sure.
When he's prying the rodent's jaws open as its like tongue is going crazy at his face, that's terrifying. That's still scary. I don't care how much it looks like a puppet.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I feel like this has kind of gone out of trend anymore, but were either of you terrified of randomly walking into quicksand as a kid?
Absolutely.
Have you seen the John Mulaney bit about this?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. He talks about how, like, was anyone else's childhood fear or like irrational fear quicksand? And then he's like, and then you grow up and quicksand isn't even a problem. It's just like a very funny bit about this, about like how in a lot of movies that we watch as kids, it was like quicksand was like the end all be all. But then you grow up and you're like, wait, there's no quicksand anywhere. Like, it's not really a problem you have to worry about.
I wonder how they did the quicksand in Princess Bride. Because it's just
I always
sand.
wonder.
Most of it looks like it's obviously just dirty water, but in Princess Bride, it's sand, and he dives in head first. I have no idea what was under there.
This also made me terrified because I have like the fact of like suffocating on sand really upset me, and still does. So like when they came out covered in sand and like puffing out of their mouths, I was like, absolutely not. Like it scared me more than the rodents. I was like, absolutely not. Like that sounds like the worst way to die. I want nothing to do with that. Ugh.
Yeah, I as I sometimes do on this show, like the moment something gets stuck in my head. So I went down like on a rabbit hole of movies with quicksand, and apparently there was like the percentage of movies, like there's a Slate article, and they
Amazing.
they have a graph that, of course, is made out of sand. That is like the percent of movies that have quicksand, and like, I mean, we're talking like 3% at the heyday, but like 1960s, between 1950s and 1960s, it was at 3% of all movies had quicksand in it, and then when we get into the 80s, we're at the sharp drop off of like less than 1%, and it like continued downward from there. And the article was talking about how like the peak of it was like when we were watching these movies, like The Neverending Story with the Swamps of Sadness, and here in Princess Bride, and like even in video games like dodging like Deadly Tar and Pitfall, like that was sort of like the kind of the tail end of movies with quicksand, and now you don't see them in movies anymore unless it's a joke about how dumb it is.
Yeah, maybe we should bring it back.
I think so.
Next horror movie you write should be include quicksand.
Just exclusively takes place in quicksand.
Exclusively.
Talk about like a slow burn movie, right? Or it's a slow sink.
It's like Buried, but they're just standing there going down slowly for an hour and a half.
It's a ticking clock. It is a ticking clock. You know, like a bomb, like just like a single location, isolated horror movie, where it's like, oh gosh, how am I going to get out of this? And I only have like an hour before I'm totally sunk. I think this could work.
It's not a great idea, but it's definitely an idea.
The other part that really fucking freaked me out was the pit of despair with that machine.
Yeah.
I was just like, I think it confused me so much as a kid. I was like, what is going on? And this can happen? Like, I was convinced it was real. Duh.
So what's your theory? Did he have 50 years of his life sucked away, or did the Miracle Max pill give it back?
You know, I was so focused on the fact that it sucked life away that I think I always thought it did. So that's how I'm gonna stick with that. It did.
It bothered me a lot when I was young, but I've recently decided that the Miracle Max pill fixed everything.
Oh yeah, that's always been my Miracle Max. I love him, Billy Crystal, and I love that his wife is played by
Carol Kane.
Carol Kane. I love her. I love her so much. And I forgot she was in this. And so when she comes running in the sea, and I just started like laughing immediately.
I'm not a witch. I'm your wife.
The other thing about the pit of despair that really freaked me out was not like the albino man that was helping, but it was the six-fingered man. Like, there's something about him that is like so cruel and sinister, and I think that's what I like in villains in movies like this that are like, they look very like suave but are actually humongous assholes. And yes, Humperdinck is played by the lovely Chris Sarandon, but there's something about the six-fingered man that just really put me on edge, and still kind of does. Anyway, and the fact that he invented a machine that could suck years out of your life was just horrifying.
That was quite the actor to put in a movie that was this silly. But I guess the whole cast was just like, they walked that line so well.
The cast is stacked.
Yeah.
It's such a good cast. But yeah, this movie scared me more than I thought. Like in watching it and remembering it, like I forgot how many parts of this comedy really kind of like scared the shit out of me.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Gosh, I'm just going to keep saying yeah, so someone else pop in.
I also will say, this is me just saying what I liked about this movie. It's like hard to have any kind of analysis at this point, but Mandy Patinkin, everything to me. My favorite part of this movie is the sword fight between him and Wesley. The fight choreography in this film is so good. When he jumps onto that like that bar and he swings around it a bunch of times, and then jumps off of it. I always wanted to do that. Like, I wanted to be a gymnast because of that part in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted so badly, and then I never did. But
It's such a convenient bar, too.
Right? Just right
like
there. Like,
there.
oh, yep, it's there. And, like, there's no reason for him to swing like that. But, like, it's just so showy and ridiculous, and it's amazing. Like, this is just, we talked about this, but, like, the way it just pokes fun at the theatrics of fantasy movies is just So good.
Keith, my writer, recently introduced me to a movie called Gymkata, which similarly, it's about a gymnast who becomes some sort of warrior, and there's a convenient pommel horse in the middle of town that he can have a fight scene on.
Oh, the casual pommel horse in the middle of town.
If you haven't seen Gymkata, it's a real treat if you like those kind of things.
I have not, but now I will.
Kind of going along with the dueling, one of the things that I really noticed this time is how this movie is kind of a musical without singing, because everything is tied to the action. It's almost I started picking it up with the dueling sword fight, the one that you're talking about between Inigo and Wesley, where it's like the music accompanies the ting ting whiff of like them, like attacking each other, and like there's a part where, as they're getting more into it, the music is building, and then when the sword goes flying in the air and he does the move and he goes to grab it, like the music just cuts out. It's like holding its breath for him to see if he's going to catch his sword, and then it picks up again, and then it's going again. But like the music becomes almost a sound effect in this movie to the same degree of like watching or reading like a comic book with like the zoom, pow, and biff. The music accentuates that, and I started to pick it up this time of just how ingrained it is with the action in such a delightful way that I obviously missed for however many years.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. That's I've never consciously thought about that, but that's a great analysis of it. I wonder if it's because it's a movie of the 80s, because that was probably a little more on trend in the 60s and 70s when the music stings hit, comedic beats or dramatic beats. But it's done really, really well in this movie.
Well, and the music is done by Mark Knopfler, who started the band Dire Straits in 1977.
Oh, how about that? Didn't know that.
And he did the music with this. And I just thought that was kind of, because I was like, I don't know who this person is. And I started looking through his filmography, and it was all a bunch of Dire Straits music video. Yeah, he was in that band. I do want to talk about, because like you said, Mary Beth, like I kind of was talking to her offline, is like my notes for this movie that I just wrote were a bunch of quotes. Like this movie is just it's so hard to talk about, because I think for all three of us, it's been like part of our life since before we probably even realized it. But I will say that, looking back on it and now, I do think I feel bad for Buttercup, because like her character's not exactly the most interesting character. She's reduced to like her irrational like tendency of like her answer to everything is like, I'm just gonna go kill myself. Like that is like her answer to everything. It's not like I need to figure this out. It's like, oh, Wesley's either gonna A, save me, or B, I'm going to kill myself. She's never empowered to like save herself. And she kind of reminds me of like the princess at the end of the castle in like Mario games, where it's like all she does is like she has to be saved either A, from a Bowser, or in this case Humperdinck, or B, saved by herself, because she also kind of exacerbates situations like pushing Wesley down the hill and then rolling down immediately after him. Like there's always that kind of stuff. And so that kind of like, I guess looking back on it now, it kind of makes me sad that she doesn't really have much agency in the film.
Yeah, it's perhaps not the wokest of movies.
No.
But at least she didn't, I don't know, there's a certain amount of bravery in true love or nothing. Maybe? Yeah, can we spin it that way?
Well, again, I'm going with this being kind of like a parody-ish of the fantasy genre. It's like they turned up the helpless princess to 11. You know what I mean? Like, and I kind of see it that way, as it being like a caricature of what a helpless princess is. She's like, I will kill myself for true love, like constantly like yelling that, and it's just like so over the top that it feels like it's parody to me.
Yeah, there's certainly that. She's not taking me overly seriously, the character anyways. She's very to the extreme.
And her red dress. The red dress is my favorite as one of my favorite parts of this whole movie. I think I really love Princess Buttercup. I mean, I guess what I loved about her when I was a kid was like I perceived her as like sticking up to men and like trying to get what she like, despite the motivation obviously being love. It just feels like she was very quick to spit in the face of anyone who tried to fuck with her. And while she was helpless, I still saw her as that a little bit as a kid. But that was also like, I've realized more as I was older, but I liked her a lot when I watched it and didn't have any real idea of like what.
How many times does she go to suicide? Is it multiple times?
It's
at least twice. Like because the first time that I know it is when like she's telling Humperdinck like, you know, I'm going to kill myself, and he's like, well, can I at least be what? Can you please consider me as an alternative to suicide? Is his first like comment to her. And then the second one it's actually, it really made me laugh this time, was when she's walking back with the king to her honeymoon suite, and she's like, I just wanted to tell you that I really appreciate you, and this is going to be goodbye since I'm killing myself once we reach the honeymoon suite. Right. And his response is like, won't that be nice? Because he's so old that he's not even paying attention.
Yeah, the first time's a threat. I don't think that counts as an attempt. I think the first time's a threat, and the time when she actually brings up the knife, I think we can count that as like a Romeo and Juliet type, like I'd rather be dead with my Wesley than alive here.
Isn't that when he says that would be a perfectly awful waste of great breasts when she's about to stab herself?
Perfect breasts in this world.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
But again, like all you can do is quote this movie. It's just absolutely phenomenal, and it's like, well,
and the cast is stacked with very funny people. Like going back to kind of Miracle Max, I love the exchange that he has with Andre the Giant's character, where he's like, "I'll call the Brute Squad," and Andre's like, "I'm on the Brute Squad," and he's like, "You are the Brute Squad." It's just like the way that line just sort of plays out in threes of like call on R. It just. This movie is so witty.
I remember reading somewhere that Billy Crystal and Andre the Giant formed such a strong friendship making this movie that's why he wrote the film My Giant, which he later had to shoot with George Mirasan.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, Terry, how many inconceivables out of 5 do you give The Princess Bride?
I mean, you know, this is like I think this is a perfect movie in some regards, and it's really hard looking at these kinds of movies with any sort of analytical eye, because it's been with us, at least for me, since before I could even really consciously remember horror movies or movies in general. So, you know, this movie, I got to give it 5 inconceivables, even though you might not know what that word means, or saying that word right, or whatever the line is. Yeah, no, this movie's great. I love it. Even with some of the more like negative aspects, maybe, that we look back on it now. I think it's a great movie. What about you, Mary Beth?
Agreed. 5 inconceivables out of 5. The way it's just like been able to sit in my brain for so long, and the way that it has had such a lasting impact on me as a film lover is just, I don't know. I also introduced me to the idea of meta. I think as I was a kid, I did not understand the fact that like the kid and the grandfather were not part of the story. I was like, what's happening here? I do not understand. So it taught me, I think, a lot about movies and what I love about movies. And yeah, so.
Have you guys read the book?
No, I have not.
I haven't, no.
I didn't even know it was a book when I was a kid, even though it's like structured as reading a book. But yeah, I've never read it either. I was just curious. Because it's written by the same guy that did the script, William Goldman.
Oh, really?
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. So, Justin, you have the final word. What is your rating of The Princess Bride, and do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, it's got to be 5 inconceivables out of 5.
Hell yeah. We're all unanimous.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think, you guys said it perfectly. It's been around forever. If there are any flaws, I sure can't see them. That's just, this is part of what movies are to me. So, it's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for joining us to talk about The Princess Bride. Where can our listeners find you, and do you have anything coming up you can share?
Well, we've got Anything for Jackson is on Shudder in the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand. Up in Canada, it's on Super Channel Fuse. And coming up is a whole bunch of meetings, and hopefully we're into another horror movie very soon.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed.
I'm on Instagram and Twitter, just my name. And yeah, I'm not very good at social media, but if people want to follow me, that's where you can find stuff out.
Cool.
Awesome.
So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What was your experience with The Princess Bride? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm McGailey Dreadful.
Don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Steve Barnold for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you to everyone for listening. Stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Won't somebody please think of the children? Won't somebody please think of the children? Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.